Confidence, me, your host and coach, JP Warren. This podcast, this episode is going to deal with something that I've been facing real personal, real up and close lately. And this whole concept of comparing myself, not just to others, but to myself. I often find myself sometimes waking up in the morning like at 3:30, and my mind starts racing. I start thinking about, man, I'm so far behind. I'm not where I want to be. How come I'm not, where I am to others? Not only do I compare myself to other people, I'm also comparing myself to myself. So this episode, this podcast today is all going to be about how we compare ourselves to other, and actually how to kind of release that and start comparing ourselves to truly ourselves and how far we've gone. I know that, especially during, slow markets, flat markets, this comparison culture often gets out of hand. People are always commenting out, if you pick up Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever it is, people are always broadcasting on how much they're hustling or the wins that they have. And I personally find that whenever I see that, yes, I am celebratory of other people's successes, other people's wins. Even when I post my wins or my successes, I find myself crippled with this, not anxiety, but crippled with this belief, this false belief that I am nowhere near where I want to be. And so I kind of want to address this today because I think a lot of people, we compare ourselves to each other, whether we do it subconsciously or consciously. And I got some notes here that I'm going to kind of bounce off of just so I don't forget anything. But at the end of the day, like I find myself like whenever I do have like a huge successful event or successful whatever it is, I don't feel proud of myself. There's this feeling of whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's comparison, whatever it is, I often have a feeling of that I'm not doing good enough. I'm not validated, or the next event, the house of cards is going to fall, or everyone's going to see through my shit and they're going to realize that I am full of shit, right? So whenever I feel success, there's always this feeling of void or negativeness or this feeling that I haven't made it. So where does that come from? Where does that stem from? We're going to dive into that today. So you can look at your, not just your progress on how far you need to go, but more importantly, just how far you've come. All right. And that's going to be the whole concept about today's podcast. So in reality, social media, look, the purpose of social media is one thing, and what it actually does is another. Social media is there to what? Connect us, let us see our high school kids, our high school friends, children, grandmas, whatever. It's there for a reason, but what it really does now, it's becoming a platform for this constant comparison. You have people on there talking about, their hustles, their successes, what they do. If you're not getting up at 4 a.m. and doing this, meetings by 6 a.m., you're going to be behind. And next thing you know, we just start comparing ourselves. You see a glimpse of people's best lives out there, whether it's their trips, their traveling, what they're eating, and you compare yourselves because you're sitting at home, maybe making ramen noodles or something like that. But we're constantly comparing ourselves. And who are we comparing ourselves to? We're comparing ourselves to other people, right? And let's think about that, right? And this isn't just other people that, we're looking at that are influencers or promoting their travel or anything like that, but even something that along the lines of LinkedIn. I find myself that there's a lot of people in my scenarios that kind of took a step out, started something new, started branching out kind of on a passion that they had. And I'm seeing, like, I've been doing this for 4 years. Other people have been doing it for 2 years. Other people have been doing it for a year, and they're finding so much more, quote, success than I have. And I do start getting down on myself. I start really comparing myself. Man, I've been doing this for 4 years. They've been doing it for 2. I feel that my platform is better, or what I want to do is just as valuable as them, but they're making more progress. But what's funny is once I start actually connecting with these people that I see make these moments of success, or these big, what appears like a big, I'm trying to think of the platform of success or something like that, these big milestones, whenever I do talk to them, I find out that they're in the same boat as I am. That just because what looks good on LinkedIn or Instagram or something like that, that doesn't always reflect the true story. So whenever we are comparing ourselves to others, realize this, that they're just showing you a glimpse of what they want you to see. All right. So it's very easy to get lost in this frame. We're just constantly comparing ourselves to others, right? And we're always thinking that, what, man, this person's moving faster than I am. This person is setting goals, hitting their goals. And what am I doing? I'm spinning my wheels. I'm kind of stuck in the mud, right? At least that's how I feel. The second thing we do, we don't just compare ourselves to others. We compare ourselves to ourselves. And I don't know which one is more challenging for me, but I think whenever we start comparing ourselves to ourselves and where we want to be, where we feel like we should be, that's what really kind of starts buckling progress and really kind of stopping any forward momentum. And that's kind of the whole goal of this podcast right now, is to talk to you about that, talk to you about kind of how to navigate through these sticky times, right? And when we're comparing ourselves to ourselves, what are we comparing really, right? We're comparing ourselves to where we thought we'd be, right? So previous goals, all right? I'm not even sure, and here's the deal. I don't even think we're comparing ourselves to previous goals, because I don't compare myself to a previous goal. I compare myself to the thought of, man, I thought it'd be so much easier once I get to this point. Or I thought, there'd be so much more inbound opportunities come in versus me always kind of have to get out there and hustle and do business development, right? So I'm constantly comparing myself to previous goals and previous ideas that I had of where I actually wanted to be, right? And then we're comparing ourselves to ourselves. We have the reality of where we're at versus the expectation. Oftentimes when we're comparing the expectations and realities, what's really happening? We are losing a lot of the true blessings and what we truly have in this world, in this life, in our reality, whether it's fruit and vegetables in the refrigerator, or whether it's, running water, or whatever it's, maybe you have a new car. It doesn't matter what it is, but oftentimes if we start looking at our expectations of where we should be, what we thought a year ago, or man, I really wish I only had this, I wish I could get this. We're always chasing that carrot. We're not really appreciating what we have right now, right, in this reality. So again, once we start comparing ourselves to ourselves, we're getting pulled away from reality. We're getting stressed. We're getting anxious. And what does that actually do? All right. Number one, for me, that makes me very frantic. I start kind of moving in directions that I'm not really confident in. I just have to feel like I have to make movement. I have to grow. I have to grow in this aspect. I have to start moving forward. Another thing it does for me, it also kind of leaves me in a place of non-motivation, non-inspiration, because what's the point? I've tried so hard the past 4 years to get where I'm at now, and my expectations of myself, my goals that I had in my mind, I'm not even there yet. So what's the whole point? So it actually stops me. It limits my motivation, limits my inspiration. So how do we flip that? How do we get in and actually flip that where we're not constantly comparing ourselves to our own personal goals, right? And again, comparing ourselves to others outside of this conversation, because if you think about it, it doesn't matter. Whenever we are on a social media platform, we're constantly comparing ourselves. I don't care if it's professional or personally. It's just something we do naturally. We see someone get promoted, we're comparing ourselves to that. Actually, you know what's funny? I had a conversation with a friend of mine, good friend of mine, Kate Hyken. We were talking, and I was kind of spinning my wheels and talking about kind of this feeling that I have that's like, man, I've been doing this for 4 years. I'm 45 years old. I feel like I'm really making some impact, but I'm not where I want to be. Then I started looking at my previous colleagues, and I see that they got promoted at this big companies. They're now presidents, they're now vice presidents, senior vice presidents, and they're all blowing and going. I'm feeling, man, I start comparing myself that I'm, left behind, that I'm not doing as well as I should, or maybe other people are in a further progression path than I am. And I started kind of divulging this with Kate, and she's had one of the coolest insights that she provided me. She said, listen, that person you're talking about that just got promoted to president or VP or whatever like that, you know them, right? I said, yeah, I know them. So what do they want in life? I go, more than anything, they want a family. They want a wife, they want children, they want to be a father. And she said, exactly. Do they have that? And I said, well, no, they don't. She goes, do you have that? Well, yes, I do. I have a beautiful wife, I have a beautiful daughter. So it's one of those things too. It's like oftentimes just because there's a title, just because there's an announcement, just because there's a press release, that doesn't mean that those people wouldn't look at your side of the fence and say that grass is greener. So again, it's all about slowing down your perspective and shifting your perspective just a little bit. And this whole concept, this is actually what she brought up, which I'm diving into, is the gap versus gain principles. All right. And I love this concept. Because we're constantly comparing, we're constantly thinking, I'm so far away from my end goal. I'm so far away where I want to be. But listen, let's pull back. Let's pause everything. Let's pretend you were where you're at, your end goal. Let's pretend you were where you're at, 6 months from now, or where you wanted to be. Is that going to be enough? Are you still going to be building beyond that? So think about that. So having that carrot, in your sight, that's where I want to be. Oh, once I get this, then I'll be happy. Once I get to this position or this title, this inbound, these leads, whatever that is, then I'm going to be happy. If we're constantly putting that contingency on our happiness or satisfaction or our personal growth at some point down the future that hasn't hit yet, think about that. We're always going to be chasing that carrot. So it's so important, this gap versus gain mentality, right? Gap versus gain. All right. So when we're waking up in the morning and we're having that anxiety, we're thinking about, man, I'm not where I want to be. I'm so far away from my end goal. What is that? All right. That's the gap. That's measuring you. I don't know where. Yeah. You right here versus your, this is dreams. That's the gap. You're always going to be measured. There's always going to be a gap between that. And there should be a gap between that. As a leader, as an individual, you should always strive to want more improvements in your life, right? Whether that's your progress in jiu-jitsu, whether that's you getting new deals, whether that's you growing your company to a certain amount of revenue, right? You're always going to want your dreams, all right? And that's always going to be a good thing. However, once you start judging your success based on the lack of you fulfilling your dreams, you're going to be in a lot lower vibration, a lot lower motivation, a lot lower inspired place. And often that leads to burnout, leads to people kind of getting stuck, analysis paralysis, imposter syndrome. It leads to a lot of negative personal emotions that it's very difficult to kind of get unstuck from this. Because think about it, you're never going to catch up to where you want your future self to be. Okay. So one way to think about this. So again, the gap, you're measuring yourself against an ideal. You're measuring yourself against a dream, a vision. That is a very tough thing to do, right? So what can we do instead? Instead, let's start looking, at least start looking a little bit. Once we do start spiraling out of control a little bit, or once we start kind of getting more in the anxiety zone, let's start looking at the gain, right? And what is the gain? So if you look at a timeline, the gain is, maybe we'll do stairs here, right? Yeah, we'll do stairs up there. So when you look at the gain, when you're measuring your gain versus your gap, right? When you're measuring yourself against, not against your dream, not against your ideals, not against where you want to be, but start looking at yourself as how far you've come. What have you actually gained along with your experience? What have you gained from when you first started, right? I can reflect back on my personal career and growth. Listen, I've been doing these operator roundtable events, these exclusive operator roundtable events, and they've been great, right? We're getting a lot of people at the table, a lot of this. I mean, if you look at the numbers, you look at the statistics, you look at the names of the table, it's unbelievable. But once I started kind of getting over here, and I started looking at other people's platforms, I started looking at other people's events, I started looking at other people doing more, quote, than I'm doing, I start feeling very down on myself. Looking back on my gains, before I even started Crew Club, I didn't have any contacts in Oklahoma City, Midland, Denver. There was a lot of places I really wasn't plugged in. Now looking back over the last 4 years, I've had over 1,400 E&P operators at my roundtables. We've connected over 1,400 individuals throughout the industry. Now, think about this. If this was JP back in 2021, saying, man, can you imagine in 4 years, going to be 1,400 people, you're going to have over 180 different events, 60% direct show. If I start kind of listening that would be living here. I would never be satisfied with that. But if I told myself that 4 years ago, if I start actually jotting it down, who came to the table, how far we've come, the conversations we've had, the connections that have been made, the opportunities, that is a lot of gain that I've made, right? So where in your life, in your progress, in your career growth, that you can say, hey, listen, I may not be where I want to be. And that's okay. We're never going to be where we, quote, want to be in our careers. But if you can pull back and stop and say, okay, how far have I actually really come in my career development? How far have I actually really come in my job, in my role, in my leading a team? What have we actually accomplished? That is a much more, for me, it's much more of a clear way to judge on just how far in the progress you made and will continue to make. Again, it also spins a lot of motivation and doesn't kind of make you unmotivated to continue. All right. So let's talk about a couple of dangers about living in this whole gap mentality. Okay. So first off, we've talked about this motivation. Right? What does living in this gap do to your personal motivation? If you're constantly waking up, you're constantly thinking, I'm never going to be where I need to be. I'm constantly this far behind my dream or my goals or my vision and everything like that. What is that going to do? First off, that's going to create a lot of imposter syndrome for you, right? It is going to fuel your imposter syndrome. And listen, here's the deal. Imposter syndrome is absolutely normal. 8 out of 10 people experience it. And if you are starting to experience it where you don't feel like you're the right person for the right role, or you being where you're at is just out of luck, and someday someone's going to call you out for not being knowledgeable or calling you out because you've been, pulling the wool over their eyes, that means you're doing well. That means you're actually in uncomfortable situations, that you're growing. So imposter syndrome is not a bad thing. However, if you're staying in this gap thing, that imposter syndrome, unless you know how to deal with it, unless you know how to identify it and actually squash your imposter syndrome, that's going to keep kind of getting a hold of you. All right. Number 2, it's going to lead to demotivation, right? What's the point? What's the point with getting up so early? What's the point with trying to get out all this content and putting out these graphics and taking all these meetings of all these team meetings, these building, navigating through these? What's the point? You're not where you thought you'd be, right? Man, this gap that I have between where I am today and where I want to be, I am so far behind. What's the point? I'm demotivated, right? What else? It distorts progress. This could not be further from the truth. I'm thinking personally myself as I continue these roundtables, as I continue these trainings, as I continue these podcasts, right? These podcasts, don't get me wrong, like there are no Joe Rogan podcasts or no Simon Sinek podcasts that I have right now. But at the same time, if I start thinking about, man, that's where I want to be, and if I'm not getting there, what's the point of doing all this stuff? It's taken away from everything I've done. It's taken away from the people that I have helped. It's taken away from the message that I've received saying, hey, this podcast or the seminar you gave, it really kind of connected me and really impacted me. All right. And also, if I am doing these networking events, if I'm doing these seminars, I'm not doing sold out auditoriums. I'm not doing, these big national things. I really haven't gone anywhere. That's not true. I need to start looking at what I've done throughout the years and just how far I've come, the students I've connected with, the individuals, the coaches, the teams, the leaders I've worked with, and seeing like, hey, slow down, stop, reflect on who I've impacted. That's what matters at the end of the day. All right. Another thing, as a leader, it can make you be an insecure leader, right? An insecure leader. Always guessing and doubting where you're at, always doubting your team, always putting the wrong type of pressures on your team, the wrong type of alignment, not celebrating the stuff that they've done, but also punishing them for not hitting the mark where you just want to be at, the ideal mark you want to be. All right. So as a leader, it's a very dangerous place to be in if you're constantly measuring your team in that gap. We need to slow down, pause, and actually look at the gain that our teams have made, right? And as a leader, think about how this sounds, right? Think about this, how this sounds if you're a leader. Hey, we're not good enough. We're not where we want to be. We're never going to get there. I thought we'd be here by now. What are you breeding in your team once you're telling them that they're not good enough, they're not going to make it, that they're not the all-star team, right? So here's the deal. You start communicating that, what's it going to do to the results? It's just going to actually put you back. It's actually going to put more gap in that, and you get further away from where you want to be because you're actually going to reduce the impact of your team, the productivity of your team. So let's dive into this. Oh yeah, I love this quote right here. If you praise destinations, nobody enjoys the journey. And that's one of the toughest parts I have as being an entrepreneur, is that I always want to feel that destination, right? I always want to get to that point where, once I get to this, I'm going to be happy. Once I get to this, I'll be satisfied and excited, right? But think about what that does. If that is my measure of success, what about this whole time in between? What about this time from when I started till when I get there? I should be having fun on this progress, right? I should be having fun on this journey. I should find this entertaining, worth living, worth waking up, eat, breathe, living this stuff, right? If I take my mind off of that and it becomes unsatisfying, not fun, why am I really doing this in the first place? Why are any of us doing this in the first place? All right. So real quick, I'm going to wrap it up by kind of giving some quick, easy ways to kind of start measuring you and your team's game. And these are just quick exercises that you can do for you and also your team, because right now it's a flat market. We're all hyper-connected yet disconnected. So no one's talking. If everyone is talking, they're talking about probably negative stuff. We're not meeting goals. We're not reaching these targets, the gap, right? So here's what you can do as a leader and as an individual to start really kind of comparing yourself to yourself, comparing yourself to yourself in the right scope, in the right lens, right? So the first thing is, let's do 3 daily wins. And honestly, let's think about this. Sometimes getting an email back is a win. Sometimes getting an appointment for 2 weeks from now is a win. What is a win for you today that actually moves you along your progress? Sometimes you may say no to dessert and actually switch over and take a walk after dinner to get a workout in. What is a win for you today, whether it's personal or professional? All right. So start jotting down daily wins, right? You get a ledger of your successes. And I have to do this whenever I'm combating my imposter syndrome, whenever I feel that, hey, that was a great event, but hey, the next one, everyone's going to call you out. This is a house of cards, smoke and mirrors, you're going to fail. I literally have to start putting down my successes in order to kind of squash that feeling of inadequacy. All right. So number one, let's start putting down some daily wins. All right. And what that does, it insulates you from this negative biases that we're not good enough. We're not going to get to where we want to be. So again, you start focusing on the wins. That's going to train your brain to start looking at the bright stuff, the wins versus your lack of mentality, where you want to be. All right. Another thing I like doing, I kind of just did this earlier, it's kind of a line exercise. Okay. So the line exercise is this. So you draw a line, okay, from when you first started. So for me, it'd be 2021, okay? You just start kind of putting down milestones and improvements and achievements that you've done along the way. So 2022, that's when we expanded to Midland, OKC. Okay, 2023, that's when we had our 100th event. Hey, this is when we had our 1000th EMP operator at the events. This is when we've had 24 roundtables. This is when we've had this. So I start stacking everything, all the progress, all the milestones, all the results we've done, right? I can take a step back and look at that. It's like, you know what? Maybe I have come maybe I have come a lot farther than I initially thought I did, right? So draw a line and start putting down some successes, some achievements down on that, so you can actually kind of take a step back and look how far you've come, right? Because you've probably come a long way, all right? And whether this is new skills you've acquired, new clients, new promotions, new office space, it doesn't matter. Start jotting down your progress or successes, because we often don't remember them, right? We're always focused on the future or what's going wrong or putting out fires today. Let's pause and look back on actually how far we've come. Another thing that we can do at the end of every month, and honestly, I've been trying to do this probably every morning as well too, and I'm trying to do my morning journaling or anything like that. Because for me, it's so easy to kind of spin my wheels and kind of not be focused and kind of start putting out fires and working in the business, not on the business. So something that I tried to do, again, monthly review, right? Let's look at this past month. Let's look at this past week. Let's look at the day. What did we do? What did we get through? What successes have we had? Where are we going, right? What have we done to actually align to shows where we're going to be going in the future, right? And then in the month. So think about this month. Questions. What did you learn? What changed for the better in your environment, your career, your choices? All right. What challenges did you overcome, and who did you help? I often find that whenever you do feel kind of not associated or disaligned with yourself, think about who you're actually helping, who are you mentoring, who are you providing advice and counsel to, right? And as a leader, you got to celebrate your gains. Celebrate your gains, not your gaps. All right. Yes, of course, you're going to be going over you go over the gaps every single day, right? But let's focus on celebrating the gains. Let's focus on, as a leader, celebrating the monthly reviews and the 3-day wins. Try these exercises with your team, right? Again, this is one of those things that is a very difficult. A lot of markets out there are very difficult right now. A lot of negative news, a lot of comparison. People get siloed. They get stuck to their phones. And next thing you know, they're getting these dopamine hits of other people living their life, having best-selling books, this, trips here, food there, dinners here, whatever that is. We're constantly in this bubble where we're constantly comparing ourselves. So pause, take a step back. So whenever you do start kind of spiraling out of, in your mind, waking up at 3:30 in the morning, give yourself some credit on how far you've actually come. Sure, there's work to do. There's always going to be work to do ahead, right? We're never going to really be where we ever want to be, because we're always going to want more. As human nature, we're always going to want a little bit more, a little bit of improvements, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But if we pause and just look how far we've come in our journey, the successes we made, the milestones, the challenges we've overcome, you're going to be pretty impressed that you've come a long way. Keep your focus on the gap. Keep your focus on the gains, not the gap. All right. Yeah. So what else? I think that's kind of it. Just remember, you're not behind. You're exactly where you should be. You're exactly where you should be right now. And I guarantee you, probably in 3 months, 4 months, you're gonna look back and you're gonna say, "Man, I can't believe I was there. Look how far I've come from since that." Right. So start thinking about yourself. Start thinking how far you've come, and keep moving forward. All right. It's a lot easier to celebrate your. It's a lot harder to celebrate your success and achievements, but I challenge you to try this, to try to celebrate your success. Try to celebrate your achievements to keep you moving forward down your direction. All right. Good luck everyone out there. Gap versus gain.